Greetings Internet, DDA here with the first official Random Number Gaming deck breakdown video. I'm excited because I put a lot of energy into this, so let's get started. Our first deck breakdown video is going to be Black Trunks, the Battle Mage. All his powers are control-y, but his high power levels make you want to lay down that AT damage. There are lots of deck profile videos out there, but this one is a different breed. Each deck breakdown video, I'm going to start out with your core. That's going to be the select cards that you're going to want to play in every Black Trunks deck. Call these staple, or call these just really great for the personality that you're deciding to play. It's no secret that a deck can be played in many different ways. When you say Black Trunks, that's not enough. There are many Black Trunks decks out there. Because of that, after your core, we're also going to break down cards based on the different types of decks, the different ways that you can play. For Black Trunks, that's going to be beats, control, and anger. Additionally, each section is going to be split up into 3 different tiers, as well as listed in order of power. This whole breakdown is one big grading scale of how these black style cards work with the personality we've chosen. So let's get started with your Black Trunks core. Your core is going to be about 30 cards, and of course is going to include a lot of repeats from other decks. There are a few staple cards in the Dragon Ball Z card game, and the first on everyone's list is always Time is a Warrior's Tool. There's not much to say about this card. Stop all your attacks, give you a combat where you can make actions freely and not have to worry about attacks coming at you. Its only downside being a combat card, that's only a small price to pay. Next up, Visiting the Past is often a question on whether or not it's a staple card. It's mostly a staple. There are only very few decks out there that would not want to play Visiting the Past, because it only really hurts you the first turn you play it. But in a control-y deck like this, Visiting the Past is going to give you the card you need in the right situation. Black doesn't play much board removal, so using Visiting the Past into a black reflection at the right time could be really key. Next up in your Black Trunks core, this is a card that truly plays off of the personality that you're playing. The main thing that you're getting with Trunks is knowledge of not only your cards, but your opponent's cards before he enters combat. If you're on your level 2 or level 4, you can look at the top of your opponent's cards, remember the name of one of them, and name it with Black Swirl. It is for this card that I feel I can get away without playing Confrontation in my deck, and that's why you won't see Confrontation included in the core. This sits strong as a 2 anger card, and since it does 4 life cards, 5 life cards means a potential critical hit. Next up, I'm glad that Trunks was given a name card that really suits his personality. The only thing I don't like about this card is that it costs a stage, but sitting at AT plus 4, removing 6 cards, and then having the additional effect to make your next styled energy unstoppable, in black style, that's a great ability. We just went over Black Swirl. Wouldn't you like a free 2 anger? Next up, and your final card in tier 1 of your core, Black Finger Block. Love this card, and Trunks definitely needs to keep on his high power stage. He drops rather quickly, especially on his level 2. He's only an E in his top 2 stages. You want to stay high on the power chart with Trunks, as that is the main reason why you're playing him. This card having endurance just seals it in your core forever and ever. Starting on tier 2 of your core, these cards are sure to be staying in this Black Trunks deck for at least a few more sets. I love Black Reflection, and Trunks plays off of this and helps you by removing cards from your opponent's discard pile with both his level 1 and level 2. His level 2 can actually search out cards and choose them. So this means if you see any attack in your opponent's discard pile that you want to play with Black Reflection, you can just choose that card when entering combat. I've often thought of dropping this down to 2, but it's kept strong at 3 in my deck for a while because I really like to draw this card anywhere after the first combat. Next up, Black Corruption is one hell of an aggressive energy block. It pretty much does damage every time you draw it into your hand. And if not, it stands as a solid energy block, raising your anger 1 and lowering your opponent's anger 2. How could I talk about Black Trunks core without talking about Black Command? We all know how powerful this card is. It has 1 endurance, and even if you pass, it still gives you anger. The big thing about this card for Trunks is it allows you to level outside of combat very easily. All of Trunks' powers are when entering combat, so leveling outside of combat and being able to pass gives you full range of use on your powers. Nearing the end of tier 2 core, you're going to see this in a lot of decks, Devastating Blow. But it really plays off of Trunks because it does add AT damage. Anything that adds AT damage is going to be really good in Trunks. It is an anger card and does give you some anti-anger, as well as playing off of Trunks' theme to remove cards from your opponent's discard pile. The last card in Tier 2 core, Black Foreshadowing. I love this card. We already went over how much Trunks wants to gain stages and wants to be at his full, so you can tell that playing Black Foreshadowing is going to be a good idea right off the bat. You're going to be able to get 3 or 4 types in your opponent's banish zone very easily, especially when your 1 and 2 remove cards. Starting Tier 3 your core, these cards are great situationally, but may drop off as more sets come out. Black Declaration is just a needed card right now. Black doesn't really have that much answers to the board, so if you're playing a really strong orange deck, having the physical defensive drills and Aura Drill in play, boosting his damage, it can get kind of frustrating, especially if you can't get out off Black Reflection for orange stare down. Which you usually can, but, it's good to be able to get around Orange Focusing Drill, or, even with Allies or a Namekian Dragon Ball deck, you can shuffle in the Ball 1, or you can shuffle in Goldo so you can go on the offensive. So I would say you would want to play 1, 2, or 3 of these in your deck. I'm leaning more towards 1 or 2. I have 1 in my deck right now. Next up in Tier 3 core, a card that is growing on me more and more over time, Black Disorienting Blow. It does AT damage, which, most other personalities like Piccolo, Krillin, they don't do that much damage on the AT chart. But personalities like Super God Goku and Trunks certainly love these because they'll actually do damage and have amazing effect. So hitting this card can mean you can use a wide array of events in the game. Every single matchup is going to have an event that you can play. In the least, you can use Stare Down or Confrontation, which is another reason why I don't play either of those in this deck. An extremely offensive card that can just turn the tides in a single combat. Next up in your core, which probably deserves to be higher in the core, Black Smoothness Drill. Drawing this card early can really put you at a strong advantage, and if you manage to get this card out when on level 3 Trunks, you can have a massive hand, a massive 6-card hand every combat. There's going to be very little that's going to stand up to you at that point. It is a drill, which is why I do keep it at 2 right now. I do level a lot with Black Trunks, so I do discard it a lot. It does have endurance, however, so I could easily justify playing 3 of these. Last in the core, a card that has proven to be just a godsend in some matchups, very specific matchups. Black Counterball. I would consider this part of the core mainly because of Trunks Sword Slice. It does make your next styled energy attack unstoppable, so using Black Counterball, following with a Black Counterball means unstoppable 10, 12 damage to the face. There are some decks where this card's not going to help you at all, so I do keep it only at 1 right now. I would justify 2 as well. I've been trying to add in another. So that concludes your core. I think a total of around close to half your deck. At that point, you would want to choose the direction you want to take your deck, whether you want to take it in a single direction and just go strong beats. You want to also have some leveling in there, or you want to have some control. We're going to go over each of those sections now. So starting with beats, Black Trunks Tier 1, number 1 on the beats list is absolutely Trunks Sword Stance. This card levels you, and it is a beady card through and through. Yes, you do gain additional control abilities as you level, but the main thing that you're getting when you level is 10 stages and lots of power level. Jumping from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 is just a great increase in power. You have to give up MPPV, so that is one downside. I would only keep this card at 2 right now. I tried 3 out. It was too much because I would level too quickly, and I don't really think the 4 is a game sealer, but it's not a level you want to sit on or jump too quickly. You really want to spend some time on the 2 to remove those key cards, and on the 3 as well. The 3 ultimately, really. Next up for beats Tier 1, we have Black Interceptor Barrage. I've had this card in my deck a while. It does 10 total damage. It is an energy attack, but it does 10 total damage, which is really nice, when you're either your 1 or your 2 and you may be a little lower. It does have endurance, which is excellent, as well as removing cards from your opponent's discard pile. Again, playing on that theme, activating your Black Reflection, your Black Foreshadowing. Next up for beats Tier 1, very similar to Interceptor Barrage, Enrage Assault. Has 1 endurance, does 3 and 3, which means it does 4 and 4 with the mastery, as well as choosing a card that's banished and removing the rest of them from your opponent's life deck. I love sniping the opponent's blocks and key attacks with this card. It's kind of like Black Scout Maneuver, just not as powerful. Last card in Tier 1 beats, Black Energy Web. A powerhouse card doing 7 life cards and shutting down the opponent's energy attacks. Start with the Trunk Sword Slice and follow up with this for a guaranteed lockout of energies. Starting Tier 2 of beats, Black Side Thrust. It does AT plus 3, which means it's going to do lots of damage with Trunks' power level. Plus, you always get to name a card and discard it. It's like extra damage that you choose. Black Entanglement is next up in your beats Tier 2. AT plus 4 can really take a toll, as you're talking about 10 damage if you're an E and your opponent's an A. The reason why this card is so high on the list is going aggressive with Trunks, using his powers, giving your opponent setups when entering combat. You know he doesn't have blocks. Enter with Black Entanglement to remove up to 2 or even 3 cards from his hand, knocking out half their hand and doing 10 damage. Follow up with your mastery to really entangle them. Next up for beats, you know that there is no better block for damage than Black Upward Dodge. Plus 4 damage basically guarantees critical damage. Lastly, for your beats Tier 2, ending with Black Wrist Lock. Ryan said this in our Black Style breakdown and I disagree with him, but I've come around on this card and I think it's a great add in some physical beats. For your beats Tier 3, starting off with Isolation. It's definitely a slower card and only helps you in some matchups, so I haven't found room for it in my current version of this deck. Next up for Tier 3 beats, we have Black Capture. It's an energy attack that if it hits, it'll attach just like Wall Breaker and banish a card from the top of their life deck at the start of every turn. This card can do some damage, but I'm always wary to add a lot of energies into a deck, especially one that has a lower PUR. Bringing up the rear for Tier 3 beats, Black Overpowering Attack. It does AT plus 6, so it can do a ton of damage even when the opponent's at full, knocking them completely to 0. But the caveat of you not being able to perform physical attacks, if you're building a physical beatdown deck, you're going to want to save this card until last. And lastly, Black Hair Trap. This card is really strong, especially with personalities that have lower power levels. But Trunks has a high power level and he wants attacks that add AT damage. Granted, even though this attack doesn't add AT damage, it still does just as much damage as our most powerful attacks. That concludes our beats section. So if you want to be aggressive and punch your opponent in the face, and if you want to win by survival victory, you should definitely consider a lot of the cards in that section. Next up for the control cards, starting off with Tier 1, we have to talk about Confrontation. I said I didn't play this card in my current version of this deck, but I still have to acknowledge the power of Confrontation. I would definitely consider 2 of these in a Black Trunks deck to be solid. I'm not sure if I would play 3 because it is just a slower card, and one of the main things it does give you is knowledge of your opponent's hand, and you're already getting that with Trunks. Next up for your Tier 1 control, Black Swipe. With 2 endurance and energy block that removes 3, you choosing 3 cards from your opponent's discard pile is just excellent. It was in my core for a while, a very long time, but I dropped it down to the control bracket because you're already kind of countering energy attacks by doing physical damage, but if you want to play a more defensive control-y version of Black Trunks, this is the card for you. Next up for Tier 1 control, Black Scout Maneuver. Black Trunks usually likes to stay and be in combat, and Black Scout Maneuver is the ultimate control card in combat. Drawing this card early in some matchups can seal you the game. Naming Overpowering Attack against Ginyu, or naming Piccolo's Weighted Clothing against Piccolo can slow them down long enough for you to overtake the match. Next up for Tier 1 control, we have Black Searching Technique. A very similar control card to Black Scout Maneuver, but this is a setup, so that's why it's ranked a little lower. Nonetheless, as the game progresses, Black Searching Technique only gets more powerful. And finally, for Tier 1 control, the last card, Wall Breaker. There's no better way to control your opponent than saying, hey, half the text on your cards doesn't exist anymore. And since this does AT damage, this can actually do a fair amount of damage. You're a D on your level 1 and an E on your level 2. Heading the top of our Tier 2 control, Heroic Energy Sphere. I know you wanted to see some of those, but I actually don't have any. You having Black Swirl and Disorienting Blow in your deck, Heroic Energy Sphere sits a little low on the tier list. Nonetheless, I would maybe find room for 1 or 2 of these in my Black Trunks deck if I had them. Next up for Tier 2 Control, we have to pay homage to Heroic Assistance. This card gives you stages and is the ultimate heroic control card that we all wanted. This was the control card we needed. It puts any physical combat, energy combat, or event from your discard pile on the top of your life deck. You can draw it next turn. Great card. Combo it with Black Reflection, Black Foreshadowing, or even Black Counterball at the right moment. Continuing with Tier 2 Control, Black Adaptation, an energy block that's proven its power in the early stages of this game. It is certainly great to combo with Counterball, as it will remove the energy attack they're using and an additional one from their discard pile and life deck. There are lots of great control cards, and you can see this with our next Tier 2 control card, Black Defensive Burst. I only wish this card did AT damage, but its hit effect is one of the greatest that Black has to offer. Look at your opponent's cards when entering, ensure he has no blocks, and then lock him out of physical attacks. Black Duck is next up, and it is a great control card if you want to be defensive. It can actually stop Wall Breaker. It has 1 endurance, and if they use a power for a physical attack, like with Gohan or Nail, you can actually just kill a free card from their hand. The final card in Tier 2 Control, often overlooked, Black Barrier Destruction. This card has 3 endurance, and let's never forget that. Removing cards from your opponent's discard pile means his choices are extremely limited with this card. Put 4 key cards back into your deck and give your opponent slim pickings with Black Barrier Destruction. Finally, for our Tier 3 Control, these cards are certainly good in their own regard, but maybe not necessarily finding room inevitably in your Black Trunks deck. Black Power Up gives you the stages that you could need and gives you the control in combat to be able to end combat in a bad situation. Blinding Energy move is very similar. It does give you that control in combat if you want to get out of combat. It does do extra damage since we are blacks. And finally, rolling out, the last of our Tier 3 Control, Black Flying Kick. It only does AT plus 2, so very low in the damage department, but it does remove the top 3 cards of your opponent's discard pile and has 1 endurance. So if you were playing a deck where you truly never wanted them to have cards in the discard pile, like if you were playing Black Barrier Destruction, you would want to play Black Flying Kick to ensure that. So that concludes, the Black Control card. I did say Trunks was a battle mage in the beginning, and I meant that. I feel like he's both a beatdown and control personality. So you're probably going to want to end up taking a lot of cards from all of these sections. Maybe you'll focus on one more than the other. Maybe you'll cut out a section, and that's really what this video is meant to do. So last up, we're going to conclude with the Anger section, the Anger type cards for Trunks. So Tier 1 Anger at the top of the list, the card that you're going to probably include in your deck if you're going to try to level piecewise with Trunks, Black Lunge. Amazing card for Trunks. AT plus 4 life cards, which means you're going to go straight for the life. Being an E, doing critical damage is very valuable, giving you an Anger and having 1 endurance. Just a solid all-around card, 3 in my life deck forever. Next up for your Tier 1 Anger, a great card, Black Hug Maneuver. It has 2 endurance, it only does AT damage, but it does give you a whopping 2 anger, and again, it does have 2 endurance. I did play this in my deck for a while. I took it out, and now I'm actually considering it adding back in, maybe as a 2-of, because it does give you that extra anger that could help you in a situation where you can't draw Trunks' Sword Stance. Next up, Black Overhead Blast. I love this card, and I've often considering it adding it back in. I did play it originally in this deck, and the only reason I would add it back in is because of the critical damage effect. Just the guarantee, well, not the guarantee, but just the critical damage effect without having to do critical damage. It does give you 2 anger, but it is a hefty costing energy, which is why I inevitably took it out. Finishing up your Tier 1 anger is a Black Knee Catch, a physical block with endurance that gives you 2 anger. Great card. The only reason that it's so low on the list is because it is a physical block, so it's very conditional. And it only gives you 2 anger, whereas the red one gives you also 2 stages. That'd be really nice. Next up for Tier 2 anger, you're going to see that Black could really use some more anger options. maybe not too many more, but some more. Empowered Flying Kicks, starting the list off, Tier 2 Anger. A really good card for Trunks because it does AT plus 2, and it sets both players' anger to 2, so you can actually use it as an anti-anger and as an aggressive card for setting your own anger to 2. Enrage Blast is next on the list, Tier 2 Anger. Really good card, a 2 anger card. It does cost 3, so it's a little lower on the list. I don't like paying my stages and going lower in the AT chart with Trunks. Bringing up the rear, Tier 3 Anger. I really would only play these if I was desperate for anger, I would say. But with Trunks Sword Stance, I don't think you should be playing these. Starting off, Tier 3 Anger, Black Concussive Blast. Costs 4. It does give you, it gives you 2 anger, and it allows you to put a card at the bottom of their deck. I mean, you're trading 1 for 1 there. But 2 anger, 4 stages. Okay, moving on. Next up, Tier 3 Anger, Black Punishment. This will do a 4 for 2, raise an anger, and then banish cards will mill the opponent. Not a bad effect, really not. I've often considering adding this in. If it did more damage, like if it did 5, I would say this would be a really solid card. But, it only does 4, 5 with the mastery. Still a good card to consider. So I hope you enjoyed my first deck breakdown video where I broke it up into several different deck types, because when you choose a personality, there are many different ways you can play that personality, and I want to highlight that there are different ways to play this game. There are different ways to seal victory. Control beats, knowledge, draw that sword, and go back in time with Black Trunks.